Hi there, welcome to Black History Month Assembly. Just to introduce myself, my name is David White. I'm from Wesleyan Youth. I'm the youth pastor. Just to let you know, I'm really excited to be with you in this way. It would have been nice to have joined you in person, but because of everything that's happened this year with COVID-19, this is one of the ways that we're having to do our assemblies. But still, really glad and privileged that your school has allowed us to interact with you in regards to, for me, which is really vital and important topic in regards to Black history. We're really going to look at some interesting stuff in regards to Black history, especially here in Britain, in the UK. So I really do hope you enjoy this time. I do hope at some point where restrictions are lifted in the future that I can come and spend time with you, doing more assemblies and more workshops. That's the plan. So I'm really grateful. Thank you to your SLT team and to all the staff that have been doing great. Well done to you all as well for handling things so brilliantly in starting back into the new academic year. So one of the things I do want you to do is this is meant to be interactive. I will ask questions, so your teachers and members of staff, they can pause the video at certain times to allow you to answer that questions. And if I can encourage staff and teachers as well to give out achievement points, reward points, or whatever reward system that you use for those students that do try and attempt to answer, and for those that do get some of the questions right, that's fantastic, even great. So we're going to go into the assembly. As I said, I really want it to be interactive. I hope you enjoy it, and I do hope you learn from it. So let's start off to begin with. So, two interesting quotes I always like to consider when we look at Black history. First one is by Malcolm X, who was a civil rights activist in the USA in America during the 60s. And he said that our history in regards to the Black Americans did not begin in chains. And I think that's true for most Black people, wherever they find themselves in the world, that any time when we think about Black history, we consign it or we resign it to perhaps the transatlantic slave trade, or maybe looking at a few individuals, especially from an American perspective. We may look at Nelson Mandela. More recently, we'll look at Barack Obama and a lot of sports personalities. We'll look at Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and so on. But it's important to know that Black history and history in general goes much further back than that. And one of the, some people might say, controversial quotes from Morgan Freeman, who says he doesn't want a Black History Month. For him, Black history is American history in regards to the American context. And I think that's also something for us to consider, that why do we need to do Black history? Surely, all history is valid and important, and absolutely, of course it is. But we need to start from somewhere, and we need to understand that there has been an imbalance in when we look at history, that there's certain aspects of history, especially from a Black perspective, that has not been it's not been promoted as much as we would have liked to. And of course, with all the stuff that's happened surrounding the death of George Floyd in America earlier this year, and the Black Lives Matter protests and the movement, it's important that we still champion and we understand that history is important, and everyone's history is equal and valid. But there's a focus on Black history to promote that history goes much further beyond than the transatlantic slave trade, and in regards to more modern, more recent history. So that's just, I think, something important to begin with and to recognise and to understand as we go into the rest of this assembly. What year or century do you think Black people first came to Britain? What year or century? Can you believe it? 1,800 years ago, it is believed that black people were found to have lived in Britain. It's absolutely fascinating and remarkable. And if I can introduce you to these two young ladies, and if I can start with the first one on the left, the Beachy Head lady. The Beachy Head lady is called so is because her remains were found near Beachy Head in East Sussex. And it's believed that she was from North Africa, of African descent. And it's also believed that from a very young age, she would have lived in Britain. Now, what's interesting, so how do we even know that this is the case? Well, because of technological advancements and a lot of scientific analysis, based on skeletons and doing excavations, we're able to carry out certain tests and analysis that can kind of pinpoint where people had originated from carrying out certain tests, and also what kind of life may they have had based on the food and the diet that they may have consumed. And so some of the experts and professors that excavated the remains of the Beachy Head lady, she was one of the only skeletons that they found that was practically all intact. And so when they carried out certain analysis, one of them being radioisotopes, where they take chemicals from the teeth and they kind of work out what kind of diet they would have had. And so it was known that the Beachy Head lady, she had a rich diet of fish and vegetables, which would have reflected that she would have been living in the UK from a young age. But also the fact that they was able to carry out certain tests on her skeleton to suggest that she would have descended from Africa. And also by doing radiocarbon dating, they was able to pinpoint that she would have been living in the UK, in Britain, around 150 to 250 Common Era, which is absolutely fascinating, which she is actually referred to as the first Black Briton on record that we have. And here she is found to have lived in Britain from a young age, but had originally originated and migrated from Africa. Absolutely fantastic. So already, this is the first glimpse that we can see that black presence here in the UK has stretched back over thousands of years. And then the second lady, the Ivory Bangle lady, she is also to have been originated from Africa as well. The difference is her remains, or the remains and the test that they carried out, suggest that she was of mixed heritage. But it also reflects that she was a Roman African. And we'll come on to that in a little while. So the Ivory Bangle lady, her remains were found in York, which is to the north of the UK. And East Sussex, where the Beachy Head lady was found, was down to the south of UK. So we can see that there wasn't just one particular area that we can find remains of black people that was residing and living in Britain during that time. And her remains were found during the 4th century. She is called Ivory Bangle ladies because of the possessions and the quite exquisite and expensive gifts or the expensive items that she was buried in. So when they excavated her tomb, she was found to have a wealth of possessions and also an ivory bangle, which would have came from Africa. The ivory from that bangle would have came from Africa. And it was known that she was quite wealthy, quite prominent, because of the fact that she was buried with her possessions. And also, we also think and believe that she would have been a Christian. She would have been a Christian, because what was written on her tomb was, "Hail, sister, may you live in God," which was quite reflective of Christian terminology during that time. So also we can see that even the influence of Christianity here in Britain would have been here very, very early on. So here we can see that we've had a black presence here in the UK much, much, much earlier than what we would have first imagined or realised, which is absolutely fascinating and brilliant. So what about the Roman Empire? Can you name any famous leader or person from the Roman era? Any famous person or emperor from the Roman era? can I introduce you to Septimus Severus? Septimus Severus was one of a few black Roman emperors. More specifically, he was a Roman African. And Septimus Severus, he was known to be the first black Roman Caesar who led an army to Britain to subdue parts of the island that was under Roman rule. He established York as his capital, and he remained there until his death. Now, what's interesting about Septimus Severus is that he came into power. He was a military leader, and during various campaigns and conquests, there was previous Roman emperors that had come to Britain, Hadrian being one of the most famous ones, because we have Hadrian's War up towards the north of England, where they fortified that part to try and stop invaders that we would now call from Scotland from coming and trying to take over Britain that was under Roman rule. And so one of the conquests that Septimus Severus decided was to go to Britain to kind of establish and fortify the war, and also to kind of create a bit of more stability in the region during that time. But what's fascinating about Septimus Severus, he was originally from Carthage, so which would have been present day Libya, Tunisia. He was of African descent, and it's as far as we're aware of, he's the only Roman emperor to have died in Britain. His remains didn't stay in Britain. His sons took his body back with them, or his remains back with them to Rome. But it's absolutely fascinating that here we have one of the first black Roman emperors also establishing York as his capital in Britain, and also being one of the only emperors to die on British soil. Absolutely fascinating story about Septimus Severus. So as we can see, and this ties into the ivory bangle lady. So this would have been around the 3rd, 4th century that it is known to Septimus Severus would have came to Britain. More so the 3rd century, we believe it would have been. So here we can see an early presence of Roman Africans residing and being very much part of British society during that time period. Absolutely fascinating. What about Tudor England? Who was the most well-known king of England during the Tudor period? Which person or king comes to mind? No doubt many of you may have said King Henry VIII, but I want to point you towards a very interesting person called John Blank. John Blank was a trumpeter who was of African descent, a black trumpeter who played in King Henry VIII's court. Not only King Henry VIII, but also King Henry VIII's father, King Henry VII. He was a trumpeter who played in the court. Now, how do we know about John Blank? We know about John Blank because there's record of him during that time of playing within the King's court. But also, if you look closely on this document here, which is from the Westminster Road tournament, where we can see his picture clearly depicting that he is one of the other trumpeters who is playing in this vast celebration that King Henry VIII had put on in celebration of his son. And here we see that John Blank has also it's also been documented that he was paid to play. He had good standing within the court. And we also see record that he requests a pay rise from King Henry VIII. He asks that he is given a pay rise in line with the other trumpeters, stating his credentials, that he's been playing in the King's court for how many years. And he actually gets that request. He is given a pay rise by King Henry VIII. It's also documented that he gets married. We're not sure who he gets married to, but one of the things that he also receives is a wedding gift from King Henry VIII, such as cloth and other various items as well he would have received. Absolutely fascinating stuff that here we can see that within the Tudor period, that there is also black presence here in Britain. Absolutely fascinating. And there's a lot of more information that you can find out about John Blank as well. But here, this is one of the things that a lot of historians that look at the Tudor period do get excited about. Who is the richest person ever? So, who is the richest person to have ever lived? Or who is the richest person alive at the moment? At the moment, the answer is, as it stands, Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon. But if I can introduce you to Musa of Mali, also known as Mansa Musa. Mansa is a title, kind of like a title for emperor or king or pharaoh. So Mansa Musa was the king of Mali. And Mansa Musa is known to have been the richest person to have ever lived. And the reason why we know this is because Mansa Musa was a Muslim. And as Muslims are as what Muslims do, they go on pilgrimage, they go to Hajj. And he went to Mecca. And on his return, he decided to pass through Egypt, through Cairo, on his way back down to Mali. But what's interesting is the records that is found of what the amount of wealth and the things that he lavished as he went through Cairo. It is known that his whole entourage, his caravan, his not just his soldiers and his men, but his slaves and his servants were all adorned in fine clothing. They had golden staffs. It was known that he had spent so much money in these markets that he actually collapsed the economy, meaning that the value of gold had went down. So imagine the value of a gold coin was worth £10. By the time he left, it was worth 10 pence. He had given away so much gold in trading, in buying various things, that he spent so much money so freely, and he was so generous that he collapsed the economy. And there's a historian that had visited Cairo 12 years after Mansa Musa's visit there, and it was reported that the value of gold was still low. That gold had kind of become not worthless, but it had become so low that it wasn't worth what it was before. And so it's believed that his worth was around $400 billion, 306 billion pounds. And in relation to, if we was to kind of equate that to someone today, and it was reported that Bill Gates, who's the owner and founder of Microsoft, that it was reported that in him being generous, wanting to give a lot of his wealth away, and he was told by a lot of financial experts that he cannot give away his wealth so rapidly. He has to be careful in how he gives his wealth away, because if he was to give it away too quickly and too much within a certain amount of time, the amount of money that would be available would depreciate. And so that's the idea, and how much money Mansa Musa had. And it's reported that he had been the richest person to have ever lived, which is absolutely fascinating. And so, as we've come to the end, I hope you've gained something. I hope you've learned something. I hope you've enjoyed it. And as you can see, we've only scratched the surface in regards to Black history. There's so much more. There's so much more wealth of Black history. Not all of it is good. Not all of it is great. There's also some bad stuff in regards to Black history as well. But it's important that we recognise and that we get to learn and understand. And just so that you know, this isn't just something that people have made up. A lot of this is from credible sources, from scholars, from professors who have done a lot of the work, who have carried out a lot of these investigations, who have excavated a lot of the remains that we've spoke about here in the UK, have gone to sources and libraries that have found out. So now it's your turn. Now it's your turn to do some work and to find out something else about Black history. something more than just about looking at the civil rights movement in America or a few sports personalities or the same characters that we tend to focus on. There is so much more to Black history than what we've explored over the past how many years within our education system. And it's important that we do that and we marry that up with history in general as well. And so I hope you've really taken something from this. I hope you've enjoyed it. And as I said, I do encourage you to look into it more so and to find out something in addition to what we've done today. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate being able to share with you just a few little snippets of Black history from a different perspective. I do hope to come and visit you at some point, do hope to come and spend some time, and so that we can also discuss and have a look at some of the stuff that you would have done and you would have learned. So I do encourage you to go away to really to grapple with some of the stuff that we've looked at today, and also to start up some more discussions, and hopefully we can develop a few more people that would want to look into this more. So thank you for having me, and I hope to see you in person at some point in the future. So take care. God bless.